So we're finishing the book of Ruth. If you have your Bibles, open up to Ruth chapter 4. Ruth is a book that's tucked in immediately between the books of Judges, and then you got your 1st and 2nd Samuel. So kind of tucked right between there is the 4 chapters in the book of Ruth. And what's going on so far, if you missed a Sunday or two, I'll give you the story. From a 20,000-foot view, there's a lady named Naomi. She had a husband named Elimelech, and Elimelech had 2 sons with Naomi. There was a famine where they lived in Israel, Bethlehem, so they moved away to go to another country where there was food to have. And while they were in this other country, Moab is the name of the country, Elimelech died, and then her 2 sons took wives, and then her 2 sons died. So now Naomi is left with no husband, no sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, and in a strange country. At that point, she says it's time to go home. As she goes home, she begs her daughters-in-laws to leave her. One says, okay, I'll stay back. The other one, Ruth, who the book is named after, says, I'm going to go with you no matter where you go. I'm bound to you. And so Naomi says, fine, that's okay. They come back to Israel, and then they live as poor people. Widows in that time didn't have a way to make money. Wasn't a real great spot to be in. That's why you see the Bible have very special concern for widows and foreigners, because there's not anything for them naturally. The Bible actually makes provisions to provide for the poor, and so during harvest time, they would leave some food for people to come after the harvesters to get. This would be similar to like a restaurant, putting the food that they've cooked but didn't serve in a special place for people to come by afterwards and grab. Not necessarily in the dumpster, but like here's a spot where stuff, day-old bread that we're not going to serve. If you want to come by at the middle of the night and grab it, that's fine. And so Ruth went out and lived that life, picking up scraps and trying to make enough food so that they would have something to eat day by day by day. She found herself in the field of a man who was loosely related to Elimelech, the dead husband, a man by the name of Boaz. Boaz takes special interest in Ruth. Last week, Naomi says, hey, it's time to start solving this problem of us being poor and unable to scrape 2 nickels together. She says, you need to get yourself a man. She doesn't actually say this, but this is the way the story goes. You need to get yourself a man. Boaz is going to be that man. Boaz was close enough family that he could redeem the family. He could keep the family name alive. And so Ruth goes down to the threshing floor where Boaz was working, lays down at his feet while he's sleeping, and basically says, marry me when he wakes up. That was the gist of the story last week. And Boaz says, okay. Right? After he figured out what was going on, he says, okay, I'll attempt to do that. But there's someone else who has the first right of refusal in marrying you. There's someone else who's a closer redeemer. And so I can't just do this. We have to do this the right way. And today we're going to wrap up the story. Starting in chapter 4, verse 1, this is what the Word of God says. It says, now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken of, the other man, came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and he sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and he said, sit down here. So they sat down. And then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. And if you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come right after you. And he said to him, I will redeem it. And then Boaz said, on the day that you buy the field from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. And the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. There is a lot going on right now in this story. So Boaz goes down to the city gate, and the city gate was where business got done. It's like the Chili's of the first century. That's an Office reference for anyone? No, okay. So it's like, where business gets done. And so you would go sit down at the city gate because everyone had to pass through there. If you were going out to your fields, you would be passing through. There was a place where there was always activity, and they kind of built a courtyard around the gate, a plaza area around the gate for people to kind of congregate together. Boaz gets up early after the whole woman at my feet incident at midnight and says, I'm going to take care of that this day. So he goes down early, sits at the gate, and waits for this man, the only other person in the line of redemption before himself. The man comes walking by. The Bible speaks so providentially of this, right? It's like, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. It's just providentially. It's like as soon as he sits down, here comes the man. It's like a made-for-TV movie. Okay, like a Hallmark movie, it just follows the script like it's supposed to. So he sits down, and he says, come sit down with me, friend. And the man sits down with Boaz, and they start having a discussion. Boaz gets together some other elders of the city to kind of like legally make any decisions binding, right? So you got some witnesses here because what we say between ourselves, like privately, may not be legally binding. You get some elders around, it becomes a binding business meeting. They had a quorum present for the called business meeting that they were jumping into there. And he says, here's the deal, friend. There's a piece of land that Elimelech owned that his widow is going to sell, and we all have an opportunity to buy it. And the way this would work, and a widow would sell the land, and the family had the right to first purchase, and you could get it for a very good deal, right? You got the family discount on buying the land. And so this man was going to be able to expand the amount of land he owned, probably double the amount of land he owned, for a relative just fraction of the cost of what it would be on the free market if there was such a thing in the ancient Near East. And so he says, hey, if you want to buy this field that she's selling, it's available today. I heard about it, but if you're not going to do it, then I want it. So do you want the field? And the guy's like, yes, I want the field. Right? Property is money. Some of you know that, living out here in my own county. And he's like, yes, I want the field. Absolutely, I want the field. And you can see Boaz like, darn. Right? But as you read the story, you're like, well, where's Ruth showing up in this? Like, why is he talking about fields here? It's because Boaz is a crafty man, and he gets the guy set up. And so the guy's like, yeah, I want the field. The field's exactly what I want. It's like the best day that he's had all week. He's been out working, threshing barley at the grain, whatever. He's been doing all sorts of nonsense. And then out of nowhere, this field just falls in his lap. Like, man, what a stroke of luck this was. And then Boaz kind of drops the other shoe. He's like, hey, when you get the field, you also get this lady named Ruth. And Ruth is Elimelech's daughter-in-law. And what's going to happen is you're going to have children with her, because that's the expectation. You're going to have children with her, and everything that is owned by Elimelech goes to them. And so this guy's like, oh, so I'm going to acquire a field, and then it's not even my kid's field or my generation's field after that, because once I have a kid, it goes directly to those people. But not just that. Let's say he had one child, which is all we know that Ruth is going to have. If he has one child with Ruth, that guy gets all of Elimelech's land, and since he's a son of that man, gets a portion of whatever he owns as well, thus disinheriting his own children of some of what they deserve. And basically, when the guy says, I can't redeem it, he's saying, I can't afford to do that. Right? I can't afford to disinherit my future children, to own a field for my life that will never be in my family after I die. As soon as he dies, the field will go to that child's family. He says, I can't afford it. I can't do it. You redeem it yourself. And what I like about this story is if you were to go back into like the original language, like this man is unnamed. Right? He has no name in the Bible. He's the close redeemer, right? And then the one time he's called by name is in verse 1, when Boaz says, turn aside, friend, sit down here. The word friend is how the Bible names this guy. And the actual word means like Mr. So-and-so. That's literally what it means. He's an unnamed figure, so much so that it's not the word friend in Hebrew. It's a word that's like, you know, that's such and such, that's so-and-so, that guy over there. And so the word means Mr. So-and-so. That's a pretty good approximation for what it means. He's so unnamed. Do you think that the author of Ruth knew the name of this man? The answer is yes. But his name didn't matter. Right? A lot of us, we worry about our name. We have a legacy. We worry about what we're leaving behind us, what we're going to have behind us. And this man was absolutely captivated by his legacy. He said, I'm going to have children, and I'm going to have a field, and I'm going to expand that, and I'm going to pass that on. I'm worried about my name. And as soon as he finds out that that field that he was going to get isn't in his name anymore, he's like, I can't do that. I'm not about Elimelech's name. I'm not trying to make his name greater. I'm not trying to pass on that legacy. Like, I'm about my name. We don't even know what his name is. Right, here we are, 4,000 years later. We have no idea who this guy is. Just some random Mr. So-and-so. You know whose name we do know? Boaz. Right, why did the Bible choose to give Boaz a name and not this guy a name? Well, he's in several times. He shows up for a longer part of the story. Yeah, all very true. But the fact is that Boaz's name matters. This guy thought his name mattered. He thought he was an important person. He sits down at the city gate. He does city business. He's a big deal in that day and time. He's an important man in Bethlehem in that day. But his name disappears. Never to be known. Never to be remembered because he was so focused on his name. Guys, I want to talk about making a name for yourself. You can make a name for yourself today. You can be well known today. You can be popular today. You can be influential today living for yourself. You can live for yourself. You can be selfish. You can be miserly. You can build up wealth and estates, and you can have all of the things, and people will know who you are. But as the sands of time wash over you, and as generations come and generations go, if your legacy is totally dependent on your name and your wealth and your prestige, it will disappear from the record. It will not last. This man's name becomes, and I think it was intentional by the author of Ruth, right, to show the people who read it in Hebrew, they're like, dang, this guy didn't even get a name. But Elimelech's name continues, Boaz's names continue, but this guy's name disappears because he's so focused on his name. Guys, as selfishness will destroy your reputation. It will destroy your legacy. In America, we elevate selfishness. We don't call it selfishness. We have other names for it, ambition or something like that. But we elevate personal, like this personal idea that you can be something. Right? I think about all of what Madison Avenue, the marketing area in New York, sells us, and it's about you. Like, you're important, you matter, your way, right away. That was Burger King, I think, right? Once upon a time, your way, right away. Right? Like, yes, I want my Whopper. I don't really like Whoppers, but if I ordered a Whopper, I would like it to be cooked the way I want it to be, right? But their whole marketing strategy is say, like, we know people are selfish, so we're going to tell you, you can be selfish here. We want you to be selfish here. We like special orders. We want exceptions. You don't want your onions on it, we don't want to put the onions on. You want us to grill them up. I don't think they do that at Burger King. That's a Whataburger thing. We'll grill them up for you. However you want it, you're all that matters to us. And this selfish lifestyle is just inbred in us at the very earliest age. I mean, it's just forced into us, right? And it's celebrated. And individual achievements are elevated. And I want to tell you something, guys. If you live that way, you may have popularity today, but it will not last. It just won't. But there is a way to have a legacy that goes forward. Boaz lived that way, right? It's an others-focused legacy, right? Or Jesus, I love the picture of Jesus because we're coming up to kind of the Passion Week, coming up near Holy Week. Next week, by the way, after Palm Sunday, Holy Week begins, this concept. Community-wide, we've done we used to do I think it was every day, 5 days a week. We did lunches at a church, and we had things, and then COVID came and kind of stopped all of that. This year, we're picking up and doing something where we're going to have some evening gatherings on Monday and Wednesday, and then on Friday, we're going to have a prayer service out at the football field, which happened a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago as well. So I'd encourage y'all to be a part of that. But Holy Week brings our eyes to what Jesus did that last week of his life. And I love the Thursday of Holy Week. And we're not high church, so we don't know all the names for the special days, but it's Maundy Thursday. It's kind of like the high church name for that day. It deals with the commandment that Christ gave on that Thursday, a new commandment I give, right? Love one another, right, as I have loved you, right? And the idea is service focused. And Jesus sits his disciples down and he washes their feet, right? And he says, look, I'm gonna make myself a servant, and I'm gonna wash your feet, all 12 of you, even the one who's already agreed to betray me. I'm gonna wash his feet today. I'm going to serve today. And Jesus, who if anyone had the right to claim, like, look at me, right? Look at how important I am. Like, he's feeding 5,000 people. He's doing miracles left and right. Jesus is that guy. He's the only one who can shoulder that load of, like, attention just pointed at them, right? He's the only one. All of us would break with that amount of attention put on us. Jesus wouldn't. But Jesus says this is the model that you should have. Serve one another. Live for other people. Boaz, his mind was dedicated to living for other people. In this case, his mind was dedicated to living for Elimelech, his deceased close relative. Maybe it was an uncle or a cousin. We don't know. But that was the place. And go down to verse 7. It says, now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging of a transaction. This is kind of like how things were ratified back then. Here we signed things with a notary. What they did then was one person would draw off his sandal and give it to the other person. And this was a manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he took off his sandal. And then Boaz said to the elders of the people, your witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to its kids, Chilion and Mahlon. And also Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon. I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, and that the name of the dead won't be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we're witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. And so everyone sits there, and Boaz says, I'm going to do this. The man says, you redeem it. He says, I will redeem it. I don't understand the shoe thing, right? Like, I wear sandals a lot, and I can't think that that's the best way for me to ratify a transaction, but I guess it said, like I'm putting my foot here. I'm seriously not going to do this thing. I have no way to come back to it. And so once the guy gave up his shoe, he gave up his right of redemption, and Boaz said, I'm stepping in to do that. And everyone there, everyone around there heard it, and they said, we're witnesses of what you're going to do. And then they kind of put a blessing on him. You know, may you be like Rachel and Leah, which are Jacob's wives, who the 12 tribes came from, right? Or later on, they say like Tamar was to Judah. And if you know the story of Judah and Tamar, that's a story that also has something to do with redemption. I won't get into it. You can look it up. It's in the kind of the middle end of Genesis. I don't know, 30-something. You'll be pretty close. If you get to Genesis 30, you'll find Judah and Tamar story. PG-13 maybe, okay? But it's a story of redemption as well, where Judah redeemed his own child's offspring and made descendants as well for them. But the idea was like that God would perpetuate a name for the dead. Right? And the whole idea is to carry on that name. And so Boaz said, I'm going to give up some of my name prestige to carry on the name of Elimelech. I'm going to make myself less so that this other person can be elevated. And this is the Christian life, right? That we're going to make ourselves less. That we're going to die to ourselves. That we're going to put our own ambitions and our own desires underneath those of Christ and ultimately those of others. Right? God blesses those people who will follow after what God tells us to do, right? To elevate others, to serve others. right? In Boaz's life, like he said, the people are all like, may you be blessed, may you be blessed like this, blessed like that, pointing back to other Old Testament examples. But really, Boaz is just saying, like, I'm going to make my name less than what it possibly could be for the potential of making someone else's name greater. Right? And that is a beautiful thing, right? To surrender some of your own glory for the benefit of something bigger. I think of team sports, right? And I'm a big team sport guy, not a big individual sport guy. Some of y'all like golf or tennis, and I can enjoy that, I guess, to some degree, but I like team sports, right? And you have the best player. There's always a best player on virtually every team, right? And that best player can choose to make the team a winning team, or they can choose to make their numbers as good as possible. And those two things are not always going to run together. So you can put up the most points on your team in every single game, and your team can lose every single game. And if the best player is happy with that arrangement, the team will lose every game, and he'll put up, or she'll put up 30 points a game, and they'll go home feeling good about themselves because they've made their name great, but the team is failing. No one cares who the best player on the worst team is. Now, it's hard for kids to understand this, right? Coaches out there have to really push this narrative. Like, yes, you are the best player on this team, but no one cares, right, who the best player on the worst team is. Now, the best player on the best team, that matters. The best player on our team that wins matters. And guys, we have to die to ourselves a little. We need to stop being so selfish about getting our numbers, getting our recognition, getting our props, getting notice for everything that we do. And at some point, we have to say, we're going to push someone else. And as believers, if you're a believer in here today, right, we're on this team of what God is doing here in the world through his church. And it's not about you. It's not about making your name great. It's not about making your impact the biggest. It's not about having the biggest platform or the biggest stage for you to be on. It's really just about you faithfully serving to elevate Christ and his kingdom going forward. Boaz said, I'm not going to elevate my name. I'm going to push to push on the name of Elimelech. And because of that, he was blessed. God is still blessing those who push forward other people's names. He's still doing this. There's still blessings in there. So much so that we know who Boaz is today. Even as he was an actor who was looking to make someone else's name great, he's someone who, like if you read the genealogy of Christ, which is why Boaz matters, right, he still shows up there. Right? Like God perpetuated his name because he was so focused on raising up other people. So, verse 13, Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son, which was a blessing for the family. And the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. May his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." And Naomi took the child on his lap and laid him on her lap, and she became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." And they named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David, who became king of Israel. Right, and I'll finish it up just because it says, now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron, Hezron Ram, Ram fathered Amminadab, Amminadab fathered Nahshon, Nahshon fathered Salmon, Salmon fathered Boaz, Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. You get the whole genealogy. Because what God does is not limited to one generation's impact. This is why Ruth is such a beautiful story. Boaz had no idea what he was doing. He knew what he was doing as far as like, this is the right thing to do for this lady. This is the right thing to do for this family. He had no idea what the impact of his decision was. He didn't know that in like 3 generations, like he would be the great-great-grandfather, or the great-grandfather, I didn't really go through that, of the king of Israel. He had no idea. Right? He was just a guy doing the right thing in the right time. In the mundane of his life, said, this is what God has put before me. I'm going to faithfully live today in this. And God had a plan that was bigger than he imagined. God's plans are always larger than we imagine, and they're always longer than we understand. Right? He is playing 4D chess that we do not get to fully grasp. So what is your responsibility? Your responsibility is to do the right thing now. To not be selfish, not be in yourself, just do the right thing now. I tell people this, just do the next right thing. Right? And whatever that is, do the next right thing. And then God will put another thing in front of you. You do the next right thing. And then when this story is done, right, when this story is over and told and it's fully complete, and that may be generations after you die, right? Generations after you've gone home. Right? But if you do the next right thing, your legacy doesn't die with you. Right? There's a story that continues on. Right? And Boaz had no idea that that's what was going to happen. But Boaz led to David, and David led to Christ, and Christ led to the redemption of mankind. See, God is doing stuff today. He's not doing, you're not going to be a part of the genealogy of Christ, right? I'm not going to put that on you. Hey, maybe one day I'll have God will be my great-great-great-great-grandson. That's a weird way to picture that, by the way. Maybe one day that'll be my story. Right? That's not the story for you. But the story is bigger than you know. And the impact is longer than you can imagine. Stop playing for short-term gains. Stop living your life like you're a gambling addict and you've just got to hit right now. I've got to get it right now. Right? Stop living like a 3-year-old who has no idea of delayed gratification. Like if you're suffering today, suffer well. Because the picture is longer than you know. Like if you're victorious today and you're winning and it's just win after win after win, understand, like it's not you. God is doing something. Just be faithful now. Because God's story is longer, bigger than you know. God, I don't know what the legacy for you is going to be. But I know that if you live for yourself, it will not matter. No one will care, given enough time. Right? If you go to cemeteries, right, there's a whole lot of granite and stone out there. And a lot of those people have positive legacies that are still intact today. Right? You know some of these people, right? It can be your great-great-grandfather you never met, but he did this, which led us to this, which led us to this, which led us here, which put me here today. There's a whole lot of people there, though, whose legacy stopped, when they passed. And that was the end of their story. I don't know what your dreams are. I don't know what your ambitions are. My ambition, ultimately, is that God would use my life to ripple out to places that I don't know, that I've never been, that I'll never be, and touch people with the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that Christ dies for sinners. If that happens through my children, who I try to love faithfully as their father, so be it. If it happens through my congregation, who I try to love faithfully, so be it. If it happens through my relationships that I have in the community, if it happens through random conversations I have with someone at the grocery store, I try to do the right thing that's in front of me today. We have a million things that we do every day. Just do the right one now. Mr. So-and-so was so worried about his name that his name disappeared. Boaz didn't care, and his name was secured for all time. His name will never disappear. When you're in the genealogy of Christ, it gets to stay. God is doing bigger things. And the biggest thing that God has done was what Boaz was leading to in the life of Jesus Christ. And then that it points to the Savior who would redeem mankind, who would die on the cross for our sins and make a way for us to have a relationship with God. We're going to celebrate that today with the Lord's Supper. Let me pray.